something and cry at first, and then realize, wait a minute, I was being suffocated in there. That is what transition can do in your life. The first stage is shock. The second stage is grief. The third stage is awareness. The fourth stage is power. And the fifth stage is peace. That is the part people do not talk about enough. Peace does not always arrive wrapped in comfort. Sometimes peace arrives after a storm, after a goodbye, after the door closes, after the system rejects you, after a plan totally collapses, after you finally stop settling. Welcome back to the podcast. I'm Dr. Shon, and today we're talking about one of the hardest truths in life. Sometimes the transition period that breaks your comfort is the same transition that opens up your freedom. Have y'all ever experienced that? At first, change does not feel like freedom. At first, it feels like grief, honestly. It feels like a loss, like confusion. It feels like being pushed out of a place you thought you were supposed to stay, maybe forever. Then something happened. You breathe different. You think different. You see different. You finally remember who you are. And suddenly, what felt like discomfort starts to feel like deliverance. Sometimes life has to shake the false floor beneath us, under our feet, so we can stop standing in places too small for our spirit. Today's message is really simple. The hardest transition in life often creates the biggest opportunity. Not because the transition is easy, not because it's cute, not because it doesn't hurt, but because transition oftentimes reveal the truth. Who was holding you? It reveals who was draining you, who was holding you back. It reveals what you tolerated because you were afraid to start over. You was too comfortable. Transition periods reveal what stability that was really captivity. Sometimes comfort can feel like captivity. All because you are afraid to step out of your normalcy. And when you finally get free from something that was shrinking you, it can feel like heaven on earth. Honestly. Not because everything is perfect, but because your soul is no longer begging for permission to breathe. There are moments in life when you have to ask yourself, am I uncomfortable because I am failing? Or is it because I'm being freed? Because many times you feel uncomfortable when you are breaking free from something that might be the reason why you feel like things aren't working out. Because every uncomfortable situation does not mean destruction. Sometimes discomfort is detox. Sometimes discomfort is the body leaving survival mode. We've been so caught up in survival mode, coming from the hood, coming from poverty. Sometimes that discomfort is your spirit saying, we cannot keep living beneath the assignment. How many of us are living beneath our true assignment and we know it? How many of us? And let me tell you something. When you become aware of who you are, you stop negotiating with anything that requires you to become smaller just to survive. You stop begging to be at tables that never fed you. You stop shrinking your voice so other people can feel big. You've been in the room, you're like, dang, let me shrink myself because I don't want to make no one else feel uncomfortable. You stop calling oppression normal. You stop calling exhaustion discipline. You stop calling captivity stability. You stop settling for less because you finally realize that less was never your portion. You deserve more. And this just isn't personal. This is historic because many people in this world have survived with unfair advantages for generations. Totally unfair. Land advantages, legal advantages, religious advantages, economic, educational, narrative advantages. They did not just take resources. They controlled the story. And remember, to my Niiji, whoever controls the story controls how people see themselves. It's going to control whether you feel like you can glow or not. That's why history matters. That's why books matter. That's why reading old text matters. And we do that on this podcast. We read older books. We read a lot of older text because it gives us that memory. When people have an advantage over the story, they try to enforce amnesia when it comes to some history if it doesn't align with their narrative. Because sometimes the evidence isn't hidden. It's sitting right there in the archives. If you could control what a person believes about God, you can control what they believe about themselves. If you can convince someone that suffering is the divine assignment, they may stop fighting for freedom. And that's what has happened across the globe, on Turtle Island, in some families. We have stopped fighting for freedom because they convinced us that suffering is a part of the divine assignment. Even history can trick you into leading a life where you think suffering is okay. You think not following your dreams is okay. You think that every day should be unhappy when really you deserve to be happy and truly pursuing your purpose every day that you breathe. But if you can convince someone that obedience to oppression is righteousness, they may call their own chains holy. If you can convince someone that the people who robbed them are also the people who are assigned by our Creator to save them, that's psychological warfare. Just think about it. That's why I say the cat is out of the bag. The documents are speaking. The apologies are speaking. The Pope just apologized for the second time about the Catholic Church and the Vatican's role and their initiation of the treason, the robbery, the genocide, the all types of sides. The documents are speaking. The apologies, the archives are speaking. The land is speaking. The ancestors are speaking, right? And the people are actually waking up. So especially for my Niiji, for the indigenous people of Turtle Island, for the people whose identity, land, labor, language, and lineage were disrupted by systems that pretended to be civilized while practicing theft and traffic. They was sitting at the red light quite a while. They was cruising through traffic. They called it discovery when they was in traffic. But how do you discover land with people already on it? They called it conversion. But how do you convert while erasing a culture? They called it civilization. But how do you civilize? By stealing, enslaving, renaming, forcing people to forget themselves, forcing amnesia. I just want to know how. How? That's not civilization. Let's be clear. This is fraud with a robe on and a cross. That's theft with a hymn playing. That's a conquest dressed up as salvation. Christopher Columbus type BS, right? And now the truth is leaking through the walls of history. But here's the part that I need for the tribe, for the family to hear. We do not study this to stay angry. We do not study this to harbor anger. Because he who angers you controls you. We study this to get accuracy. Because accuracy gives birth to power. When you know what happened, you can stop blaming yourself for wounds you inherited. Oh yeah, you stop blaming yourself for the generational curses that was placed upon the family, my family. That's why it's Hood2Hooded. Because we got to break generational curses to go from hood to hooded. And hooded is a state of mind. Sometimes it appears physically with doctoral degrees. Sometimes it appears physically with businesses. Sometimes it appears mentally when you're just happy in the spirit and you didn't let nothing break your spirit. Stop acting like you have a character flaw because you know what happened. When you know what happened, you can stop accepting smallness as your destiny. How many of us walking around here accepting the smallness as the destiny? You're not even striving to be everything you can be. You're not even looking past the ceiling, looking to the sky where the stars at. You're not dreaming that big. You accepting smallness. This is why transition matters. Because sometimes your personal transition is connected to a larger awakening. You are not just leaving a job. No. You are leaving a mindset. You are not just changing cities when you need a new environment. You're changing your standards. You're not just starting over just because you're transitioning and it feels a little uncomfortable. You are starting from the truth. You are not just healing, you are remembering who you are. And when a person remembers who they are, the whole room shifts, right? When you do your genealogy, the whole room shifts. The whole family dynamic shifts. When you break generational curses, everything shifts. The first point I want to make is discomfort is not always dangerous. Sometimes discomfort is the old life losing access to you. I'm going through that season where the access has been denied, limited, or granted. You got to put 3 categories: denied, limited, or access is granted. Set boundaries. The second thing is the transition exposes false security. Everything familiar is not safe. Everything stable is not sacred. Sometimes the cage has furniture. You thought it was a home, but it's really a cage. Oh, I'm so sorry. Sometimes the cage has furniture. The third point I want to make is awareness is wealth. Once you see yourself clearly, you cannot keep accepting fog. You will not continue to accept smallness. You will have imagination, creativity. You will have no doubt. You won't have any room for doubt because you will know who you are and you will know that you're capable of everything that you can dream. But if you don't dream, that state of fog can stay with you forever. The fourth point I want to make is history is not dead. History is the root system under modern life. It's the fruit. If the fruit is bitter, we got to check the history. If the fruit is bitter, we got to go to the roots. I was never really a fan of history in the past, but now that I know, my history is a lot more intriguing. And I've fallen in love with learning about history and unlearning a lot of things and refilling my cup with true history. The fifth point is never settle for less than your spirit knows is possible. Settling is expensive. It costs peace. It costs time. It costs health. It costs destiny. It costs a lot of shit. Can we be real? So never ever settle. Because you settling because you think this is better, but settling only ends up costing everything. No small destinies. Destinies must be bigger and further than the eye can see. Bigger and further than the eye can see. Look at the transition that you're in. Maybe it hurts. Maybe it's too much. Maybe it feels like you're losing your mind. Maybe it feels confusing. Maybe it feels like life is dissolving. I don't know. But ask yourself, what if this is not the end? What if this is the exit? And I'm holding on to something because I can't see how grand the future is, but I'm holding on to something that's dissolving, that's confusing. When I have a pathway in front of me that is so grand, I just can't see how big it is. What if this uncomfortable place in the hallway is between your survival and your freedom? What if the thing you was grieving was never big enough to hold your future? You grieving it, but you gotta let it go. When I left Nashville as a new doctor, fresh from graduation 10 years ago, I had to leave everything and move to New York to start a residency. I cried like a baby because my whole life I came from poverty, and everything that I collected up until this point, I had to just let it go, sell it, just leave it. Because it couldn't go with me to my future. And I cried because I didn't understand it. I didn't have the wisdom I have now. I was highly a consumer back then. So that hurt, right? But what if the thing you were grieving was never big enough to hold your future? Don't let discomfort lie to you. You're not being buried. You are being replanted in this new season. You're being replanted. So that is our positive message for today. And this is just taking us from the hood to our future. This is Dr. Shon, aka Dr. Cheap the Sunflower. And hopefully you like, share, subscribe, join for our newsletter. You can get your free Hood2Hooded starter kit. The link is in the bio. Remember, every day is a lesson. And if you're in your transition season like me, be okay with being, uncomfortable. Because it always leads to something bigger. You can't let nobody steal your glow. Yeah. Better let them know.